Why would God place desire in the human heart if not to test it? Carl Jung once said that what we resist the most is what reveals us the most. And nothing exposes the truth of a soul like the silent war between instinct and spirit, when the body calls, when the mind imagines, and when the soul tries to stay still. That's where the real battle begins. It's not about pleasure, it's about power. Desire is the battlefield where God watches who controls and who is controlled. The strongest soldiers are not those who feel nothing, but those who feel deeply and still choose awareness. Jung believed that the erotic impulse is not a mistake of nature, but a secret language of the unconscious trying to show us what remains un. The test is not to resist it blindly, but to understand what this fire is trying to teach you. Because in the end, God doesn't tempt you to destroy you. He tempts you to reveal you. Have you ever wondered why the most intense desires appear exactly when you're trying to be your best self? It's as if something inside knows precisely when you're most vulnerable, when you've committed to growth, to discipline, to higher purpose. This timing isn't random. In the depths of the human experience, desire speaks a language few understand but everyone feels. Jung discovered that our strongest urges aren't accidents or cruel jokes played by a distant creator. They're messages, urgent telegrams from parts of ourselves we've abandoned, ignored, or never properly met. The fire in your veins isn't meaningless. It's trying to tell you something essential about who you are. Think about the moments when desire feels overwhelming, not the gentle pulls of everyday wants, but those consuming fires that seem to hijack your very being. These aren't random biological glitches, they're profound psychological events. The intensity of the feeling directly corresponds to the importance of what's being communicated. When you feel that pull towards something you've deemed inappropriate or beneath your spiritual aspirations, what's really happening? Your conscious mind has created an ideal imidida, perfect spiritual seeker, the moral person, the disciplined soul. But beneath this carefully constructed identity lives everything you've pushed away: your wildness, your animal nature, your capacity for chaos. The unconscious doesn't communicate with words. It speaks through feelings, urges, and dreams. When lust arises with unexpected force, it's because something vital in you is being neglected. The more you deny certain aspects of your humanity, the louder they must shout to be heard. Godor, the organizing intelligence of the universe, if you prefer, doesn't place these tests in your path to make you fail. The divine isn't interested in watching you suffer needlessly. These moments of temptation are invitations to wholeness. They're opportunities to recognize what you've been refusing to see. The strongest warriors face the fiercest battles not as punishment, but as acknowledgement of their capacity. In ancient traditions, initiation rituals didn't spare the pain, they intensified it precisely for those who showed the greatest potential. Your desires intensify not because you're weak, but because you're ready for deeper understanding. What if the solution isn't found in fighting harder, but in listening better? Jung suggested that integration, not elimination, is the path to genuine spiritual maturity. The energy bound up in your desires doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be understood, respected, and redirected. Think of desire as water. You can build a dam to hold it back, but eventually the pressure becomes too great. Alternatively, you can build channels that direct its flow towards something life-giving. The same energy that powers lust also fuels creativity, compassion, and authentic spiritual connection. When desire strikes, try something different. Instead of immediately judging it or trying to push it away, pause. Ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? What neglected truth about myself is demanding attention? This doesn't mean blindly following every impulse. It means treating your desires as messengers rather than enemies. The paradox is beautiful. By truly facing your desires rather than simply resisting them, they begin to lose their compulsive power over you. When understood, the energy transforms. What once felt like a curse becomes a source of insight. The test isn't about whether you can repress desire indefinitely, it's about whether you can integrate it into a more complete version of yourself. This is the secret language of desire, not mindless temptation, but profound communication. Not a divine trap, but a divine invitation to greater self. The question isn't whether you'll feel desire, but what you'll learn from it when it inevitably arrives. The ancient stories always seem to know something we've forgotten. From Job to Jesus, from Buddha to Mohammed, greatest spiritual figures didn't walk easy paths. The closer they came to truth, the more intense their trials became. This pattern isn't coincidental. It's fundamental to the journey of the soul. Why does God or life itself seem to test the strongest souls more severely? When you look at the people around you who embody genuine spiritual depth, you'll often find they've walked through fire. Their faith wasn't built in comfort, but forged in challenge. Their wisdom wasn't inherited, but earned through confronting precisely what they feared most. Jung understood that the path to wholeness follows a counterintuitive logic. The brighter your conscious light shines, the more spiritual, disciplined, or morally upright you become, the darker the shadow you cast. This isn't punishment, it's physics, it's balance. For every step toward heaven, a corresponding depth of earth must be acknowledged. Those walking a genuine spiritual path inevitably encounter what Jung called the shadow, all that they've disowned to maintain their, and nothing reveals the shadow faster than desire. The monk faces sexual temptation. The pure-hearted encounter rage. The generous confront greed. It's as if the universe has a perfect memory for exactly what you've tried to leave behind. This explains why those with the strongest spiritual aspirations often face the most potent desires. It's not because they're failing, it's because they're succeeding. The intensity of the test matches, the intensity of their commitment. The universe doesn't waste its most profound lessons on those who aren't ready to receive them. Consider how diamonds form not in gentle conditions, but under extreme pressure. Gold is purified by fire, not by being left alone. Similarly, the human spirit doesn't reach its potential through comfort. It requires precisely calibrated challenges that push us to our limits without breaking us entirely. When intense desire appears in the life of someone sincerely pursuing growth, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a mark of readiness. The universe doesn't send its hardest battles to its weakest soldiers. It sends precisely what each soul needs for its next evolution. The Tesmaches, the Testar, ancient wisdom traditions understood this through initiation rites. The more promising the initiate, the more demanding the trial. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. Some truths can only be learned through experience. Some strength can only develop under load. Some wisdom can only emerge after confronting what you most fear within yourself. The strongest souls face the greatest tests because they're capable of learning the most from them. They're ready to transform difficulty into insight, pain into compassion, and temptation into success. Lesser challenges would simply not catalyze the growth they're prepared for. What appears as divine cruelty is actually divine respect. God or life, or the unconscious knows exactly what you need to face to become who you're capable of being. The fire that feels like it might consume you is actually the fire that's refining you. But this refinement isn't automatic. It requires conscious participation. When desire strikes with unexpected force, remember this pattern. The strength of the temptation reflects the importance of the lesson. What feels like abandonment is actually attention of the highest order. What seems like punishment is actually profound respect for your capacity. This explains why saints throughout history have described their spiritual journeys not as peaceful ascents, but as battles. They weren't fighting external demons, but the unintegrated aspects of themselves. Their victories didn't come from destroying these aspects, but from transforming them through understanding and acceptance. The next time you face desire that seems overwhelming, remember you're not being punished. You're being initiated. The test isn't evidence of your weakness, but recognition of your strength. God doesn't test the strongest soldiers through lust to break them, but to complete them, to show them what remains unintegrated in their journey toward wholeness. These tests reveal not just who you are now, but who you're capable of becoming. They're not obstacles on your path there, the path itself. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. What if the very thing you've been fighting against contains the key to your freedom? The ancients knew something modern spirituality often forgets: fire destroys. Yes, but it also transforms. It turns ore into metal, sand into glass, and the unrefined soul into something clear and purposeful. Your desires aren't accidents, they're alchemical ingredients waiting to be worked with rather than against. When intense longing strikes, most people follow one of two paths: indulgence or repression. Neither leads to freedom. One creates temporary relief followed by deeper emptiness. The other builds pressure until something eventually breaks. Jung discovered a third way: the path of transformation. This isn't about fighting harder or surrendering completely. It's about changing your relationship with the energy itself. Think about fire for a moment. Left uncontrolled, it destroys everything in its path. Completely smothered, it dies, leaving you in darkness. But properly channeled, it cooks your food, warms your home, and powers engines that can take you anywhere. The same principle applies to desire. The question isn't whether to have it or not, it's what you'll do with it once it appears. The first step in transformation is radical honesty. Not just admitting you feel desire, but looking deeply into what it's really about. Surface desires often mask deeper ones. The craving for physical pleasure might actually be longing for connection. The pull toward forbidden experience might be your soul's attempt to break free from artificial limitations. By getting curious rather than judgmental, you begin the alchemical process. Jung noticed that what makes desire so powerful isn't just its biological basis, it's the meaning we attach to it. When something becomes forbidden, it gains psychological energy. When something is repressed, it doesn't disappear but grows stronger in the darkness. This explains why religious communities often struggle most intensely with the very desires their teachings most strongly prohibit. The more energy you spend fighting something, the more power you give it. The purification process begins with a counterintuitive move: bringing your desires fully into consciousness, not to act on them necessarily, but to understand them completely. What exactly do you want? What do you imagine this desire would give you if fulfilled? What emptiness are you trying to fill? What wound are you trying to heal? These questions don't weaken your resolve. They strengthen it by removing the unconscious power the desire holds over you. Every desire contains wisdom if you're willing to look deeply enough. The pull toward physical beauty might reveal your soul's longing for perfection. The craving for forbidden pleasure might show where your life has become too rigid, too controlled. The attraction to what's new might highlight where you've become stagnant. When you extract this wisdom, the desire begins to transform from a compulsive drive to a conscious teacher. Ancient spiritual traditions understood this principle. In tantric practices, desire wasn't eliminated but channeled toward higher awareness. In Christian mysticism, the language of divine love often paralleled human passion, recognizing that the same energy could be directed toward transcendent experience. Even the Desert Fathers, known for their austere, didn't seek to become desireless, but to transform desires aimed from the temporary to the eternal. The fire that purifies works in stages. First, it burns away illusory false belief that fulfilling any particular desire will bring lasting satisfaction. Next, it consumes attachment, desperate clinging to specific outcomes or experiences. Finally, It transforms energy, redirecting it from consumption to creation, from taking to giving, from self gratification to service. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice, a discipline, a daily choice to work with your desires rather than against them. Some days you'll succeed brilliantly, others you'll stumble. What matters isn't perfection, but persistence. The willingness to keep turning toward the fire with curiosity rather than fear. When desire arises, instead of immediately fighting it or following it, try something different. Breathe into it. Feel its energy fully. Then ask, how can this same energy serve something larger than momentary pleasure? What's the highest expression of this force moving through me? Sometimes the answer might surprise you. Creative projects emerge, compassionate actions arise, or new forms of connection appear. The strongest souls aren't those who feel nothing there, those who have learned to direct their fire toward purposes that align with their deepest values. They haven't eliminated desire, they've elevated it. They haven't escaped their humanity. They've transformed it into something that serves both themselves and others. This is the ultimate alchemy, turning the base metal of instinctual desire into the gold of conscious purpose. Not by denying the fire, but by learning to work with it skillfully. Not by becoming less human, but by becoming more fully, authentically human. The purifying fire doesn't leave you empty, it leaves you transformed. What happens when you push something underwater? It doesn't disappear, it builds pressure and eventually resurfaces with greater force. The same principle applies to your deepest desires. The parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge don't obediently vanish. They go underground, gathering strength and waiting for moments of vulnerability to emerge with surprising power. Jung made a discovery that shocked the religious world of his time. The more you directly fight against a desire, the stronger it often becomes. This isn't because you lack discipline or because God has abandoned you. It's because you're using a strategy that fundamentally misunderstands how the psyche works. Repressing the conscious effort to push away unwanted thoughts and feelings creates the very conditions for their eventual triumph. Consider what happens physiologically when you tell yourself, I must not think about this. To monitor your success, your mind must keep checking whether you're thinking about the forbidden thing, which means, paradoxically, you must keep thinking about it. This creates a loop that strengthens neural pathways rather than weakening them. The more you try not to think of something, the more prominent it becomes in your awareness. Spiritually ambitious people often fall into this trap with the best intentions. They notice a desire that conflicts with their values and immediately declare war on it. They increase their prayers, their meditation, their fasting all, with the aim of eliminating what they see as a dangerous impulse. Yet despite their efforts, the desire persists or even intensifies. This isn't failure, it's evidence of how the psyche actually works. The warriors who fought their desires most fiercely throughout history often became defined by those very struggles. Their identities became so wrapped up in the battle that they couldn't exist without the enemy. Jung noticed that many deeply religious people unconsciously needed their temptations without them. They wouldn't know who they were. Their entire spiritual identity was built around resistance rather than affirmation. This creates a psychological dependence on the very thing being fought against. The monk who builds his life around fighting lust needs lust to continue his spiritual project. The ascetic who defines himself by overcoming greed needs the temptation of material wealth to maintain his sense of virtue. Without realizing it, they've created systems where their enemies must persist for their spiritual identities to survive. Another problem with direct repression is that it splits the psyche. Instead of working with all your energy flowing in one direction, you create an internal civil war. Part of you fights against another part, This division weakens you and creates the perfect conditions for what Jung called denunciation, principle that anything pushed to an extreme eventually transforms into its opposite. The most repressed eventually become the most indulgent, the most controlled eventually break into chaos. How do you escape this trap? Not by fighting harder, but by fighting differently, or perhaps not fighting at all. The alternative isn't uncritical surrender to every impulse. It's developing a new relationship with your desires based on understanding rather than rejection, integration rather than division. Start by recognizing that the presence of desire isn't evidence of spiritual failure, it's part of being human. The most evolved souls don't become desireless, they become masters at working with desire's energy. They don't waste strength fighting against themselves, but direct their full vitality toward what truly matters. Next, practice honest awareness without immediate judgment. When desire arises, simply notice it. Ah, there's that feeling again. Don't rush to condemn it or yourself. Don't immediately try to push it away. Just observe its quality, its intensity, its specific character. This simple act of conscious attention often begins to transform the desire without direct confrontation. Then get curious about what this specific desire might be trying to tell you. Every recurring desire points towards some unmet need, some unacknowledged truth, some aspect of yourself seeking expression. By listening rather than silencing, you begin to extract the wisdom hidden within the impulse. Finally, redirect rather than repress. Once you understand what's really driving the desire, you can find healthier, more aligned ways to honor its underlying message. The energy that powers lust can fuel creativity. The force behind greed can inspire healthy ambition. The drive beneath anger can energize justice. Nothing needs to be destroys everything, can be transformed. The strongest warriors aren't those who've eliminated their enemies, but those who've turned former adversaries into allies. They haven't achieved perfect purity by eradicating desire. They've achieved integrity by understanding desire so completely that it no longer controls them, eat, service, them. This isn't a path of less resistance, it's a path of more wisdom, not fighting less passionately, but fighting more intelligently. Not lowering your standards, but raising your understanding. The trap of repression isn't escaped through surrender, but through the more challenging, more rewarding work of integration. How do you know when you're being tested? When does an ordinary temptation become something more a crossroads, a threshold, a moment of truth designed specifically for your growth? Throughout history, spiritual traditions have recognized certain patterns in how divine tests appear. These aren't random struggles, but carefully calibrated challenges arriving at precisely the moments when you're ready for deeper transformation. The first sign often appears in timing. Notice when desire intensifies immediately after you've made a significant commitment. Perhaps you've dedicated yourself to a spiritual practice, committed to a relationship, or set a meaningful goal. Suddenly, opportunities for distraction multiply. Temptations that had been dormant awaken with surprising force. This isn't coincidence, it's a natural response from your psyche, and some would say from the universe itself. Jung observed that any significant movement toward consciousness creates an equal and opposite pull from the unconscious. It's as if the universe wants to make absolutely certain your commitment is genuine. Are you serious about this path? Are you willing to face what it will cost? These tests don't come because you're failing, they come because you're succeeding. The universe doesn't bother testing those who aren't ready for growth. Another signal appears in the specificity of the temptation. Divine tests aren't generic, they're precisely customized to your particular vulnerabilities. They target exactly what would be most challenging for you personally. The monk who values purity faces sexual temptation. The person committed to honesty encounters situations where lying would be easier. The one dedicated to compassion meets those who seem impossible to love. The test always addresses your specific growing edge. Intensity provides another clue. Ordinary desires come and go with modest force. Divine tests bring an almost overwhelming energy desire so powerful they seem to threaten your identity. This intensity isn't punishment, it's respect. It reflects the importance of the lesson and your capacity to learn it. The fire's heat matches exactly what's needed to transform you without destroying you. Persistence marks another sign. Some temptations appear briefly and vanish. Divine tests tend to recur, presenting the same lesson in different forms until you fully integrate its teaching. If you find yourself facing the same challenge repeatedly, despite your best efforts, consider the possibility that there's something here you haven't yet fully understood. Some wisdom you haven't extracted, some aspect of yourself you haven't yet acknowledged. Perhaps the most significant signal is internal division, a sensation of being torn between two powerful forces. Part of you longs to follow the desire. Another part resists with equal force. This inner conflict isn't weakness, it's the very crucible of transformation. The intensity of both the pull and the resistance creates the necessary conditions for something new to emerge. Without this tension, no growth occurs. Pay attention also to dreams and synchronicities surrounding periods of intense desire. The unconscious often sends messages through symbolic dreams, unexpected encounters, or meaningful coincidences. These aren't random events, but guidance from deeper levels of awareness. They provide clues about the true nature of what you're experiencing and how to navigate it. Physical symptoms sometimes accompany divine tests: unusual energy in the body, disrupted sleep patterns, or spontaneous emotional releases. These physical manifestations reflect the profound energetic shifts occurring as you navigate the challenge. The body knows what the conscious mind often denies, that something significant is unfolding at levels beyond rational understanding. The appearance of helpers marks another sign of divine testing. Just when the challenge seems impossible, unexpected support arrives: a book with exactly the wisdom you need, a conversation that brings clarity, or a person who embodies the quality you're struggling to develop. These aren't accidents, but responses to your sincere engagement with the test. Help arrives not to remove the challenge, but to ensure you have what you need to face it successfully. Perhaps the clearest sign comes in retrospect. Looking back at periods of intense struggle with desire, you recognize how perfectly designed they were for your particular growth. You see how what seemed like torment was actually precise medicine. You understand that had you been spared these tests, you would have remained smaller, less whole, less capable of genuine love and service. When you recognize these signals in your life, something shifts. What once felt like random suffering becomes meaningful challenge. What seemed like divine abandonment reveals itself as divine attention of the highest order. You're not being punished, you're being initiated. You're not feeling, you're being invited into a deeper level of authenticity and power. This recognition doesn't make the test easier, but it changes your relationship to it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this teaching me? What strength is this developing? What false identity is this dissolving?" These questions transform your suffering from meaningless pain into purposeful challenge. Divine tests aren't about pass or fail in the conventional sense. They're about engage into your willingness to show up fully for the lessons life brings. The question isn't whether you'll ever feel desire again, but whether you'll allow it to become your teacher rather than your master. Not whether you'll achieve perfect purity, but whether you'll develop perfect honesty with yourself about what moves within you. When you recognize the test for what it is, a precisely calibrated opportunity for growth, you can engage with it consciously rather than reactively. You can approach it with curiosity rather than fear. You can receive it as an honor rather than a punishment. Because, in truth, God tests his strongest soldiers, not to break them, but to reveal them to themselves and to the world that needs their fully awakened presence. What if the real victory isn't defeating desire but transforming it? Jung discovers something revolutionary. Spiritual maturity isn't found in perfect purity but in perfect wholeness. This path doesn't mean surrendering to every impulse. It means bringing all parts of yourself into conscious alignment with your deepest values. Integration begins when you stop seeing desire as an enemy to be conquered and start recognizing it as a messenger carrying important information. This shift doesn't lower your standards. It elevates them beyond simplistic battles of good versus evil into the more nuanced territory of wholeness and authenticity. The journey starts with radical honesty, facing everything moving within you without flinching or judging. Most spiritual traditions begin with know thyself, because without this foundation, all other practices build on illusion. The courage to see yourself clearly creates the possibility for genuine transformation. Next comes compassionate acceptance, not of harmful actions, but of your full humanity. Accepting that you contain multitudes doesn't weaken your resolve. It strengthens it by ending the energy drain of constant self rejection. When you stop fighting yourself, you can redirect that energy toward growth. Integration requires dialogue with disowned parts of yourself. Rather than endlessly pushing away what you don't want to feel, you learn to ask, what are you trying to tell me? How can I honor what's valuable in you without being controlled by you? This internal conversation transforms adversaries into allies. The alchemist spoke of turning lead into gold not by destroying the lead, but by transforming it. Similarly, integration doesn't eliminate desire, but changes its expression. The same energy that powers lust can fuel creativity. The same intensity that drives addiction can energize dedication. The same passion that seeks possession can evolve into compassion. This transformation happens in ordinary moments. When desire arises, instead of immediate rejection or surrender, you pause. You breathe. You get curious about what's really happening beneath the surface craving. This simple act of conscious attention begins to change your relationship with the energy itself. The integrated person doesn't become desireless, they become the master of desire's expression. They direct its energy consciously rather than being directed by it unconsciously. This mastery doesn't come through repression but through relationship, knowing desire so intimately that it becomes a servant rather than a master. Jung observed that this integration creates a paradoxical freedom. Desires that once seemed overwhelming lose their compulsive power not because they've been eliminated, but because they've been understood so completely that they no longer operate from the shadows. What we bring fully into consciousness no longer controls us from the unconscious. This integration manifests in balanced living. Instead of swinging between rigid control and collapse into indulgence, the integrated person maintains steady alignment with their values while remaining flexible and compassionate. They don't need to prove their purity because they've found something more valuable, their authenticity. The world recognizes this integration when it sees it. While those still battling desire often judge others harshly, the truly integrated soul creates space for others to be human. Having made peace with their own complexity, they can accept the complexity in others. This is the ultimate victory, not the elimination of desire, but its transformation into purposeful energy, serving your highest calling. God tests his strongest soldiers through desire, not to see if they can destroy it, but to see if they can integrate it, bringing all their power and passion into alignment with divine purpose.